Plaster of Paris, formaldehyde, arsenic, alum. These are all things that the Victorians ate unknowingly, and we're going to find out just here. I'm right in front of the pharmacy here, and pharmacies are a bit of a focus today, but also the food. Surviving Victorian food. That's the subject of today. And we're going to focus on some sweets later on in the video at the end. But let's start here. This shop on the corner, I'll give you some other shots of it, was a chemist. And you'll see Mr. in the photo I put up, you'll see Mr. Saunders out there. Let's see if we can make him give us a wave. In an old photograph, back in the day, you could get things like starch, which some confectioners would put on food, but we're talking about additives to your food. We're talking about things that people did to make the food not just last longer, but also make the food stretch to more people. Things like many pubs were accused of doing, which was watering down the beer. Now the house brew, possibly even house wine, which is usually the cheaper option back in the day. You ask for the house wine, you get a glass of wine, but there may be quite a percentage of extra added water in there to water it down to make the wine go further. This was a day when many things were very, very expensive. Sugar was one. Bakers used a trick with their flour, which you will hear. And I'll hand you over to VoiceOver Dave, who will tell you a little bit about the additives in our food. Over to you.
Do you worry about chemicals in your food? Do you worry about trans fats or pesticides, or whether that free-range chicken had a sufficiently inspiring childhood? This, of course, is adorable and fundamentally, tragically stupid. Because if you want to understand the true glorious existential terror of chemicals in food, you must travel back to the great British Victorian era. An era of boundless optimism, rampant industrial growth, and the quiet, widespread acceptance that your daily diet was, statistically speaking, more likely to kill you than the industrial machinery you worked with. In the Victorian market, everything was cheap. Due to a fundamental misunderstanding of supply and human greed, it was simply impossible to make an honest living by selling something that was actually what it purported to be. The only way to succeed was to sell something that looked like what people wanted but cost less than the actual raw materials. Take, for example, bread. Bread should contain flour, but flour was expensive. So the question became, what other white powdery substance could be substituted that looks enough like flour to fool someone who hasn't been allowed to chew anything solid since the age of 3? The answer arrived at through a process of rigorous profit-driven scientific inquiry, or what contemporary historians refer to as shoveling it from the nearest quarry, was plaster of Paris, also known as gypsum, or, if we're being particularly precise, calcium sulfate. It was a breakthrough. Bakers, being the pioneers they were, discovered that not only did plaster of Paris stretch the flour, but when combined with a generous dose of alum, a mild purgative, often used to firm up pickles, or, in this context, to keep the bread looking deceptively white even when stale, the mixture became structurally sound. This principle of substitution was not limited to bread. Oh no, it was applied with a ruthless egalitarianism across the entire dietary spectrum. Milk, for instance, was frequently watered down, which meant it was often watered down with water. Water in Victorian London, of course, was generally just purified sewage, so this was a delightful synergy. To compensate for the pale, bluish appearance caused by the excessive dilution, the innovative seller would add a dusting of chalk. This addition not only restored the desired milky opacity, but also provided the consumer with a healthy, though probably fatal, dose of calcium carbonate. And then there was tea. Tea was precious. After the leaf was once used, it was painstakingly collected, re-dried and dyed with substances like Prussian blue, or quite commonly a dash of copper carbonate. The copper carbonate gave it a fresh, vibrant green colour, and also a persistent, aggressive nausea. But one must suffer for one's afternoon ritual, mustn't one?
Right, I've got the script voiceover, Dave, and you haven't actually told us about the arsenic. Tell us about the arsenic incident.
Ah, the arsenic incident. This brings us to confectionery. Sugar was crucial and naturally expensive. The solution? Substitute sugar with arsenic. Now, to be clear, sellers didn't always intend to use arsenic. They simply needed a cheap white powder. And in 1858, in Bradford particularly, a sweet maker purchased what he thought was a harmless, cheap starch powder to coat his popular, let's say, peppermint lozenges. It was in fact 12 pounds of highly toxic arsenic trioxide, mistakenly stocked by a careless pharmaceutical chemist. The resulting deaths, which numbered around 20 and caused hundreds of agonizing illnesses, the victims turning a rather startling shade of blue-green, was treated not as a failure of manufacturing standards, but as a minor logistical oversight. The problem wasn't that the sweet was poisoned, the problem was the wrong type of white powder had been used, a minor bureaucratic error, easily rectified by purchasing a different cheap white powder next time, or possibly just plaster. The good news is that this period of casual, pervasive poisoning eventually ended. The result was the 1875 Sale of Food and Drugs Act, which technically made it illegal to feed your populace plaster, chalk, or various lethal oxides. The Victorians, of course, promptly ignored it for decades.
But generally, with these regulations that have been put in place, we are supposedly a bit safer with our food. But anyway, if you got this far and enjoyed the video, thank you very much. And if you haven't already, please subscribe, give it a thumbs up, and I'll see you in another video. Stay safe.